that's the agenda, like housekeeping, which was already done by Jersey. I will just talk about Scale itself, just a few slides. Then we go into directly the technical workshop, and please follow my colleague William, because after the or during the workshop, we will raise a few questions and we will choose a winner, and you will win a Scale survival kit, let's say. So please take care about what we are saying and telling to you. So maybe that's helpful for answering the questions correctly. We at Scale Computing, we are a US company based in Indianapolis. Our European headquarters is in the Netherlands. And we do a hyper-converged solution for targeting for distributed enterprise and edge computing, but as well for small and medium customers, which means we have a real hyper-converged solution which is made for these target audience. And that's because we want to do IT infrastructure very, very simple, reducing the complexity, and want to be like the smartphone or an iPhone of IT infrastructure. So we are not alone in that, because we are running on, for example, Lenovo hardware. We have an alliance with Google for for public cloud things. There's more to come later, and we have other technology partners like Acronis for additional and advanced backup and disaster recovery purposes, or we're working together in the VDI part together with Parallels and Leostream. We have a very outstanding support, so that's measured in the so-called Net Promoter Score. That's 91. That's the highest in the industry, or in the HCI industry. And there's only one support. So whenever there's something, you just need to call Scale support. We take care about the Lenovo stuff. We take care about the Acronis stuff. We take care about the Leostream stuff. So all the technology partner stuff is taken care by Scale support. So for sure, we have a couple of customers. So I just go through that. I don't want to talk in detail about customers. Whenever you want to know more, just let me know. For sure, I can talk about hours only about our customers, but that's not the point today. We want to talk about our product, which is called HC3. And HC3 is the combination between servers, storage, and hypervisor together in a single solution. From my point of view, I'm calling that very often the real hyperconverged. And in our product, we have a couple of things. So that's unified, manageable, just out of an HTML5 browser. We will do that in a couple of minutes. Also the feature set with all the self-healing, high availability, snapshots, deduplication, whatever things. We see that for sure in the tech demo or in the technical workshop. And that's quite nice. We have a complete stack. All the software is always included. There's no licensing model, whatever. And we have a very competitive pricing. So a Scale cluster starts at around about 15,000 euros. You know that traditional complex infrastructure and HCI is doing things easier. Basically, the main difference I will just go through, because I'm pretty sure William will talk about that more in detail. And also just the main thing is with Scale, you are able to create let's say much more for the same. So you don't need to spend so much money for hardware, or you can run more VMs on the same hardware, and you're able to create edge and micro edge systems. And that's the portfolio, just an overview, starting with the HE150, going to the HE500, HE1200, and right now, quite new, the HC3000 as an NVMe only system. please talk to Alstor for any pricing, whatever things you need, and just after the presentation, you're able to do your certificates. That's just easily done in the partner portal. So when we have just a time, we can go in the partner portal, so that's easy to register, and there you can easily do the certifications. That's just answering a few questions. I'm pretty sure after the demo by William, you are able to answer the question, and then you're able to participate at the so-called partner education promo. You see that pricing here, and everything what's here you will get also from the colleagues at Alstor whenever you need something. So that's a very big chance to get the smallest HCI cluster of the world for very low money. So thank you very much. That was everything from my side for now. Just introducing Scale and myself, and now I will hand over to William, and we're starting directly into the technical workshop. And as I said, whenever there are questions, please raise the questions.
Ja tylko w międzyczasie powiem, że proszę o pytania, ewentualnie w chatboxie, może być po polsku, to albo ja odpowiem, albo przetłumaczę, jak Państwo uważacie. W każdym razie chatbox będzie najlepszy chyba do tego.
Like Thorsten, I need to do a sanity check. Everybody can see my screen. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. So here it is, the great skill cluster. One of the things that I wanted to go into details a little bit deeper is the big difference between what a skill cluster is and what we are doing different than our competitors, because I think that's what everybody is here for. So let me start by showing you a slide. You've seen this before when Thorsten was running over it, but what you see over here on the left is what most of our competitors are doing, which is a so-called VSA architecture, or a virtual storage appliance architecture. And on the right-hand side is what Scale is doing. So on the left side, what we see is the result of very quick engineering and gluing together a lot of older, already existing components to build something new, which is called hyperconvergence. So let me turn on my nice laser pointer. What you see over here is a virtual storage appliance. So it's a virtualization environment. You see 3 hypervisors, 3 nodes. Each of these hypervisors run a couple of VMs, and one of the VMs that they are running, this virtual storage appliance is drawn below, but it's actually a VM that's running over here, is taking care of all the smart stuff that this hyperconverged solution can do. So it is actually the glue between the hypervisor, the network, and the storage. What we have done different in our solution is that we have used drivers to connect those to the hypervisor. So this means we don't have to hairpin between existing virtual machines and the underlying hardware and hypervisor to get the data written. So the big example here is when this virtual machine wants to change a dot into a comma in a document. What it needs to do is it needs to go from the virtual machine to the hypervisor, from the hypervisor over the network to the virtual storage appliance, from that virtual storage appliance to the storage kernel of the disks, and from the storage kernel of the hypervisor to the physical disks. Then it needs to go back to the network, go to the a other hypervisor, and store the redundant data over there. So to change a period into a comma in this VM, on average between different technologies, so you need to think about HP SimpliVity, Cisco HyperFlex, Nutanix, all of these technologies, at an average, they take about 36 steps to save a data change of a point into a comma on disk. What we've done different is we don't have this virtual storage appliance, but we've integrated our intelligence, our smarts, into the storage kernel driver. So a virtual machine directly goes to the storage kernel of the hypervisor and writes its data directly to disk. Then it goes from the storage kernel to the network, over the network to another environment, and to another disk, depending on whether you do standard storage, so SSDs and spinning disks. It will go to the storage kernel of this machine and then to disk. If you're doing NVMe, we're doing NVMe direct, so it can actually be written directly without intervention from the hypervisor. This virtual storage appliance, because it needs to do all the smart things that these technologies can do, and think about snapshots, think about deduplication, some of them do compression, think of all these things, it requires a lot of resources. So I think that Nutanix is actually the one that does this the very best in terms of the least consumption for a virtual storage appliance. And their virtual storage appliance can run with as little as 24 gigs of RAM in a 3-node configuration. You could also do a 2-node configuration, which is even smaller, but you can't extend that. So I'm not going to take that into account. This means that if I have a 3-node cluster, I would require 72 gigs of RAM just to turn the solution on. I still don't have any virtual machines running. So this is 72 gigs of RAM that I'm giving away to another process, and I can't spend on my virtual machines. It also means that, for instance, for doing the high compression, it requires, with Nutanix, 8 virtual cores per node. So let's do a 4-to-1 virtualization ratio for that. That means that every node loses 2 physical cores to a virtual storage appliance. Again, those are a lot of resources. In our solution, because we are using drivers and because we are doing this very, very lightweight, and because we don't have that additional networking overhead, we can do with only 4 gigs of RAM on each node. And keep in mind that that 4 gig of RAM is including the hypervisor. That is not the case when you do a VSA architecture. That's excluding the hypervisor. So over here, the 4 gigs of RAM is including the hypervisor, and we call it a fraction of a core, but basically 25% of a core is needed for our processes. So we are extremely lightweight, which also means that we can build way smaller nodes. So take as an example, if you would have a minimum Nutanix configuration, I would have a node with 32 gigs of RAM, of which I need to do 24 gigs of RAM to my virtual storage appliance. That leaves 8 gigs of RAM to run my virtual machines on. That is not much. You would actually be paying more RAM for the solution than what it provides. So that's a thing to think about. Let's call it like that. So I'm not going to do a presentation all the time. Let's take a closer look at this cluster. In the top left corner, we see a very nice scale logo, which we recently changed, and everybody's really happy with the change. Before the logo change, I was actually wondering whether I was working at a hyperconverged company or maybe selling cars. Just a joke, just a joke. Then we see the name of the cluster. I'm explicitly saying that this is a name. This is not a type of the cluster. I have another cluster here ready for another demo, which has a different name, as you can see. And we see the version of the cluster. The version over here is not really that important. Obviously, new clusters or new versions come with new features and stuff. But what is really important over here is the update. please take your pen and paper. There's going to be a question on this subject. When an update is available, you will see a yellow text down here that says update is available. And when you click on that, you go to the update page in the control center. There's no update right now, but I'm going to show you anyway where it is. And there will be a big black button here that's saying apply update, and obviously a description of the update. When you click that apply update button, everything that comes after that is fully automatic. So all the VMs on the first node will be live migrated off. We call that evacuated. Then the node will be checked. After the check, it will be upgraded. Then it will be rebooted, checked again, and when everything is okay, it will be taken back into the cluster. And so on with the second, and so on with the third. Now, there's a couple of important things. The first one is if that update fails, the rollback of an update is also completely automatic. So let's say the first one goes okay and the second one for some reason has an error. The rollback for that process is also automatic. Even when it has a very critical failure, the other two nodes actually have enough information to restore a third node if really necessary. The other very important thing to note here is we only sell appliances. So you can only buy scale computing pre-configured, completely done. But this is for good reason, and this is because our update does not only include the hypercore update, we call our operating system hypercore, but it does not only include the hypercore update, but it also includes all the firmwares for the server hardware. And we can do this because we sell appliances, so we know what kind of hardware is running everywhere, and we know what kind of updates are required. Another note here in that same story is that we have a fantastic backwards compatibility track record. So actually the cluster that I have over here, the WDVC demo cluster, that's the one that if you listen very carefully, you can hear it buzzing in the background. It's 10 years old and it still runs the latest and greatest operating system, the latest and greatest hypercore. So there's no 5 years end of life and we will no longer support it. No, our hypercore system is actually still running on the first systems that we ever delivered to customers. Then we go to the middle over here and we see the telemetry. You see how much CPU I'm using, how much RAM I'm using, how much disk, IOPS, latency. Please take note that latency is measured in microseconds and not in milliseconds. And with disk, we can actually click on this. What you see over here is that I'm using approximately 2.3 terabytes in VM space, about 1.5 terabytes of snapshots over here. I'm saving about 3.25 terabyte through deduplication. We use deduplicate on write. And at provisioning, you can see that this is a demo cluster, obviously, because it's been given out over 11 times. That's not that bad in a demo environment, but in a production environment, I would be a little bit more careful there. An additional good thing to tell here is that all of the features that you're seeing in this demo, all of the features that I'm talking about when I show my additional slides, all of the features that Thorsten has spoken about before, everything is in the appliance. There's no part licensing, no functionality licensing. Everything that is part of the HC3 cluster is in the cluster. Replication, deduplication, thin provisioning, everything is in there. No Enterprise plus with a gold edge and a purple feather in your head. Then all the way to the right over here, I have my notification center. Over here, you can see that some of my connections have been severed, or actually they were never connected. Good time to talk about those connections. Every node comes with 4 network connections, 10 gig, either base T or SFP plus, of which 2 are for the front end and 2 are for the back end. The back end is for live motion, our storage traffic, you name it. The front end is where your virtual machines communicate with the rest of the world. Going down, you can see these 3 blocks, and these 3 blocks represent the 3 nodes of my cluster. You can identify them by this IP address. And actually, the management GUI that you are looking at right now, I access this through a URL because this cluster is running in Indianapolis. But if I were to be in Indianapolis, I could actually access this cluster, this interface on all 3 of these IP addresses. Since we do not know the concept of a master node or a management server or anything like that. No, every node in the cluster is capable of fully managing the entire system. So what does that look like? This is an overview of our architecture, and you can see the 3 nodes that you just saw. You see that there is a network virtualization layer. Networking is handled completely automatically by us. So if you do not give a VLAN to a virtual machine, so if you are a very small company, you don't do anything with VLANs, you're not interested about VLANs, all ports will be promiscuous and basically will be communicating to the default port on your switches. If you do give VLANs, the network infrastructure inside Hypercore will be generated automatically. So if I introduce, let's say, VLAN 15, I've never used it before, automatically a new VLAN will be created on the existing V switches, will be distributed over the nodes, and will be trunked to the outside world. Then below you see the compute virtualization layer. Our hypervisor is based off KVM, but we've made a lot of changes to it, so it's no longer compatible with regular KVM. It is compatible with QCOW2 files. So if you already have KVM, you can actually migrate your virtual machines very easily, but the management infrastructure is no longer the same. Obviously, because we've changed a lot of drivers and we changed the way that virtual machines can interact with our storage. Below there are the scribe virtual disks. So these are the virtual disks that are created for the virtual machines. As you can see, they have a 1-to-1 ratio, and a virtual machine obviously can have multiple virtual disks in there. However, this is nice for the representation. Below there is the scribe data placement layer, and this is actually the driver that I've been talking about. This driver knows all of the physical disk block addresses on all of the nodes. And then below that we have the Hypercore backplane network. So the scribe data placement layer and the Hypercore backplane network together make sure that we can build a distributed block-based file system out of all of the physical disks that you see in the physical nodes. Now, a couple of questions that I usually get when talking about this picture, and I'm immediately going to answer. The first one is no, we do not do data locality. Data locality, for instance, Nutanix uses data locality to circumvent the shortcomings of the virtual storage appliance. So if your VM needs to access all its data through a VSA, I'm already introducing an extra step, which means extra latency. So I don't want this VSA to also start reading from other nodes, because I have to go to each VSA to access that data. So it's much more efficient for them to do everything local. Because we don't have that interference, and because we think it's better for redundancy, we do not do that same data locality. It would actually theoretically be possible that a VM, when writing a block, would actually only be accessing data on other nodes. Theoretically, of course. In practice, you will never see that, but it could happen. Simply because we do not think this is a good idea. The second one is what happens when I have failures. So I have a lot of data written to a lot of the disks over here. Maybe it's nice to, I don't know how well the animation works, but you see that block 1 is written to node 1 and node 2. Block 2 is written to node 2 and node 3. Block 3 is being written to node 3 and block 1, etc., etc., etc. for all of these VMs. So it's a truly distributed file system. Now, what happens when a disk fails? When a disk fails, that data is being made redundant immediately again. So you see over here that I have block number 2 and block number 8 on the failing disk, which is the second disk of node 2. When it fails, that data is being reproduced on another node again. And again, it is made redundant. You can see that block number 2 went to disk 3 on node 1, and it also exists on node 3 on disk number 1. And block 8 that was on that same node now exists on disk 4 in node 1 and also on disk 1 in node 3. So the data is redundant immediately again. That is one of the reasons that when a disk fails and the data has been made redundant again, we call this a informational warning. This is not a heavy warning, not a critical warning. No, it's just informational. Hey, keep in mind you have a failed disk. You should replace it timely, but don't worry, I've got you covered. When the disk is placed back, it will be prioritized for new data, meaning that it will be filled up again, and we will try to make it as balanced as possible, but we're not going to automatically rebalance all data and start shifting around data because there's no need. It's already redundant. We will use that new disk with higher priority to make sure that it's being filled up quicker than the rest until it's in a balanced state again, but there's no rebuild operation. A good reason for that, and this comes from the time when I was still a EMC storage trainer, most of the disk failures actually occur during the rebuild of another disk. Because you are accessing data that you are normally not accessing, saying the parity data on the other disk, and because you're putting a lot of stress on the storage controller, this is a good reason for other disks to fail. So by not putting that load on there, we are actually not triggering that. The other thing is, like I said again, the data is already redundant, so there's no issue there. What happens when a node fails? When a node fails, obviously HA will kick in. Those VMs are rebooted on an other node, meaning that obviously because that node failed in some catastrophic way, they're being rebuilt, and you will have a degraded redundancy until you have the node back online. So going back to the demo, I see that there's a couple of questions coming in, and I am absolutely triggered by the Oracle question. Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah. The question about Oracle is how is it possible to install Oracle server on Windows systems, and what happens when with number of Oracle's licenses? Does it require three times more licenses? And the rest of the question is, may I block the space where Oracle will be running and will not be moved to another nodes? That was the question about Oracle.
Cool. Those are actually really cool questions. As we all know, Oracle has this policy that says you need to license every node that it can potentially run on. This means that in a standard cluster, let's go back to this picture again. In a standard cluster, I would have to absolutely license all 3 of these nodes, which obviously is something that is not really cool because it costs a lot of money. We do have a solution for that, and that solution is that we can actually enable a node in storage only mode. This means that that particular node will participate in the distributed file system. So it will do this part of the picture, but it will not do virtualization. So let me, so it will not do this part. Admittedly, I would still have to license 2 nodes, but I could potentially say that this would be an interesting situation, because then you can do high availability for your Oracle cluster, but we can at least prevent you from having to license the 3rd node. This same construction also goes for your data center licensing with Microsoft. So one of the big downsides of having a minimum requirement of 3 nodes in a cluster is that if you're doing Microsoft Windows Server virtualization with Data Center Edition licenses, you have to license all the cores that do virtualization. And this goes in 16 core packs. Also, in this case, I could do a 3-node cluster with virtualization turned off on the 3rd node, introducing HA. Now, here is a really, really cool benefit of this system, and this is extremely new. This was only released by support last month, and we don't even have the button in the GUI yet, but you can already have it enabled by our support department. The nice thing is, now let's say that this node is storage only, and node number 2 is virtualization, node number 1 is virtualization. Let's say that node number 1 fails, so it drops out. This means that HA is going to reboot all these VMs over there. And what I can now do, until I have my node repaired, I can call support and ask them to enable virtualization on node number 3. And when I've repaired node number 1, I can say make node number 1 the storage only node. So I can re-enable my HA as soon as possible, and then reintroduce the defective node as the storage only node. Quick warning here, this does work for Microsoft, because Microsoft says as long as you don't go back for the next 60 days, everything is okay. This does not work for Oracle. Oracle, when they do an audit, they will go into the database server and just generate a report that says it has run on all of these nodes, so you need to pay. So again, the changing of the storage only node does work for Microsoft licensing, does not work for Oracle licensing. This is a very important difference here. Does that answer the question? I hope so, then. Okay.
There's another one. What you could do, especially Oracle or as well as Microsoft SQL licensing. So you're running your, let's say, normal virtual machines in a traditional 3-node cluster. And next to the 3-node cluster, you put a single node where only runs the database, and you have replication and also replication and, let's say, high availability mechanism by the database itself, which means you only have to license a single node for Oracle, for Microsoft SQL, whatever, and have a replicated VM on your normal cluster for disaster recovery purposes. So we have this done at a customer in Austria in 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay, William, I see that your question was accepted. They say okay, but there's another question regarding the minimal node number. I managed to answer that and said that it is free. I suppose it's okay, but there's the rest of the question regarding how the solution is protected from split brain.
That's the whole reason that we have a minimum of 3. With a minimum of 3, you always have a majority share if there is a networking problem. If you have larger clusters, so I could imagine having a cluster of 5 or 6. Keep in mind that we do that we have a backplane and a back-end traffic and front-end traffic, and as long as not both of them are severed, we can detect whether or not a split brain event is happening. You might kind of compare this to a storage heartbeat in VMware. Does that answer the question? I think Gregors?
Yeah, you are right. Yeah. Oh, cool. He's writing, so we'll see. But after that, he asked us also another question regarding storage policies and how to define them, and whether it is possible to define failure to tolerate, number of failure to tolerate.
The last one is not yet. We are working on that as a roadmap item, but it does not have a date yet. So currently that's no. We have a write factor of 2, so you could lose a maximum of 1 node in a cluster. However, we do have multi-cluster management, which allows you to manage up to 1,000 clusters and the ability to live migrate VMs between clusters. So that could be an additional failure factor if you want to call it like that. The other one was how to define storage policies. I will get to that in the demo, so I'm going to postpone that question to later.
Okay. So now we are fine with the question. So I think you may go on. So there's a thanks from Gregor. So I think you may continue.
Cool. So we've discussed the 3 nodes and how they work together and what's in there. What you are seeing right now, so these white lines that you see in these nodes is actually the memory consumption. And here again, you can see that this is a demo cluster because I just told you that we never use more than 4 gigs of RAM, but this one is actually using 10.9. This has to do with the fact that there's also happening testing on this, and there is additional scripting running on it. If I go to my own cluster over here, you can actually see that I'm using 4 gigs of RAM per node, and this is actually a reserved amount. If I were to go into the backend of this system, I could see that I'm currently only using 1.9 gigs of RAM, but we reserve 4 gig for future instances. And the nice thing is it doesn't matter if, like me, you have a very small cluster that it only has 32 gigs of RAM, or you have a very large cluster with nodes with up to 1.5 terabytes of RAM. It will always be just this 4 gigs of RAM. In the same fashion, I also have an overview of my disks. And here you can see that this is actually a hybrid system. This system has 3 600 gig nearline SAS drives, and it has 1 SSD, and that configuration is the same in every node. My own small cluster has spinning disks only. And like Thorsten already said, we also have a all SSD, so an all flash option. And announced this month, we also have an all NVMe system. And we're actually also looking at introducing systems where NVMe is the fast tier and SSD is the slow tier. I remember when having my first SSD and I was all up in the clouds and really happy. And now I'm talking about SSD as the slowest tier. That's kind of funny for me. We do not use any form of caching on disks. What we do is we have something that's called the heat priority. So I can go to my demo VM over here and go to the disks in the virtual machines. And you can see that I have 3 virtual disks in this particular demo VM. Now, when I get to the configuration of this disk, you will see that I have something that's called the heat priority. And this heat priority is the priority setting for where storage should live. So when I set this, I actually have a very nice animation about this. Let me pull that up. There we go. What I have here is 3 different disks, and this is actually literally my configuration. My virtual machine that runs here has a disk with 0, a disk with 4, and a disk with 11. In a traditional scenario, so back to the days when I was an EMC trainer. If I were to have to size for a database server, I would always have a rate 1 for average performance for my operating system, a rate 10, so more spindles, more performance for my log files to be able to write really, really quickly, and a rate 5 or a rate 6 for my table space, just for the slower data and the data that's probably never going to be accessed again. So how does this work in a scale system? When a disk with a heat priority of 11 writes, it always writes to SSD. Same goes for a disk with priority 4, it always writes to SSD. A disk with priority 0 will always write to spinning disk. Now, if I continue this, you will see that my SSD is starting to fill up, and right now my SSD is quote unquote full, and I write new data for 11. This will displace data from the disk with priority 4 to the spinning disk and make space free for the data with priority 11. So the higher the priority is, the longer that data will stay on SSD, and data with priority 11 will always replace other data. So if I give a disk priority 11, chances are really, really big that that data will remain on SSD forever. I'm not going to promise you that it's going to stay there, because if that disk is filling up, older data will also be replaced. So heat makes sure that data with a higher priority is written to SSD and can displace older data. Data with priority 11 will be attempted to be kept on SSD as long as the SSD is not completely full. Now, to manage this, we start with offloading data when the SSDs reach approximately 60 to 70%. Then we start offloading data. So the priority curve on a virtual disk can be managed by this heat priority. So 0 is everything to spinning disk, 1 up to 10 is write to SSD and offload to disk, 11 is try to keep everything on SSD. Cool. So we are at our virtual machines now anyway, because I gave you the demo on the heat priority. So
William?
Yes?
May I interrupt for a moment? Maybe there's a time to ask some questions to our audience. I think, yes. Okay, so let Błażej to show the questions to ask the audience. Błażej?
Yes, I will show the first question for the first part of William's presentation. So, yeah. W tym momencie powinniście Państwo otrzymać na ekranach swoich komputerów, swoich monitorów pytanie odnośnie pierwszej części. Poczekamy chwileczkę, aż większość z Państwa udzieli odpowiedzi i wówczas zakończymy pierwsze pytanie i William rozpocznie, będzie kontynuował swoją prezentację.
Jakieś 15 sekund poczekajmy po prostu.
Tak, już jest 57% osób odpowiedziało na pytanie, więc poczekajmy jeszcze chwilę. Tak, 61. Liczba rośnie i widzę, że to są same... Dokładnie tak, właśnie są prawidłowe odpowiedzi, więc może pytania były za łatwe.
Okej. No cóż, będziemy losować. Survival Kit będziemy losować w takim układzie.
Przez 70% osób odpowiedziało. Dobrze, myślę, że możemy zakończyć ankietę i udostępnię Państwu wyniki. Czyli wszyscy odpowiedzieli, osoby, które udzieliły odpowiedzi, odpowiedziały prawidłowo. Jest to odpowiedź oczywiście druga. Hypercore Software i serwer firmware. Ja zakończę w takim razie udostępnianie wyników i poproszę Williama o kontynuowanie prezentacji.
Thank you, Blaine.
Yeah, okay, William, sorry, that you can start your presentation.
No, I'm starting to understand you. I heard I was going to continue.
Okay, great. So you know Polish.
I'm learning here. I'm learning.
Yeah, very fast. Okay, that's great.
So one of the things I actually forgot to mention in that previous page with the describe virtual disks, and I think is important, is to just quickly mention there is no other storage configuration. So when you create this cluster, when you install this cluster, all the storage is being put into one. If you want to call this like this, go ahead, but we don't call it like that, but it's everything is one big pool. So all the disks are just in one big storage pool, and the tiering mechanism makes sure that data gets to a place where it belongs. So let's go to the virtual machines. If I take away this filter over here, you can see all my virtual machines over here.
William,
yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't see your screen.
Oh,
so please reshare that, or yeah. I do not know.
So when I create a virtual machine, and creating a virtual machine is extremely simple. It's like typing a new message on your iPhone. You just go to the plus button and you can create a new virtual machine. I will call this a new VM for demo. I can give it a description. I'm not going to do that because I'm lazy. The first tag that I give it is the actual grouping tag. So in being allowed to use this demo cluster, I always have to name, give my VMs the tag demo William, so that my colleagues all know that these are my virtual machines and nothing happens to them. I can give it additional tags. So I can use this search filter that you saw me using earlier also for these tags. So let's say I have a web environment with a Oracle database, with a back-end node, and with a front-end server, and maybe even a load balancer in there. That's 4 virtual machines. If I could give all those virtual machines the web front tag like that, and I could find those VMs, that set of VMs, really quickly by using that web front tag. You can do other things with it. I'll show you later, but basically for finding this is already a good start. Then with the operating system, I can choose between Windows and something good. For the drivers, I can select performance drivers or compatible drivers. If I choose performance drivers, I will get the Red Hat VirtIO drivers. If I choose compatible, I will get standard IDE and standard Intel E1000 network drivers. I can choose a number of CPUs. I can select an amount of RAM. I can create a virtual disk, maybe add another one a bit larger, always nice to do. And I can select a installation media. Now in this GUI, I can select up to 3 virtual drives. Later on in the device settings, I can actually select way more. And I can click create over here. There we go. You can see that it's now creating. Oh, actually, this one is it's creating my virtual machine demo. Now I can use this search tag over here to find this new virtual VM that I have over here. And there's a slight problem that I have with Chrome. This is my fault, not the fault of the cluster, but I need to do a refresh because it doesn't automatically refresh when I create stuff here. That's something that I did wrong. And as you can see, I haven't been cleaning up my previous demos either. So let me quickly delete these virtual machines. So you see over here your new VM. You see my demo VM, and you see another VM that's being used by one of my other customers. So what's in here? let's start with the power button. When I press the power button, this VM will be started. If I have a VM that is already running, I have the option to reboot this VM. This is a graceful reboot, meaning that it will send a signal to the operating system that it needs to be rebooted. I can do a graceful shutdown. Again, this sends a signal, or I can do a power off, which is like pulling the plug out of there. The default view is always the telemetry. I have the devices, which we'll go through later, and I have the snapshot engine that we'll go through later. But also the console here is pure HTML5. Remember that I told you that the management GUI is on all of the nodes in a cluster. Well, also the console viewer is on all of the nodes in a cluster. So I don't need any additional tools to take a look at this node. Or at this VM, sorry.
William, there's a question. In meanwhile, it was asked in English, but I read it just to speed up. Does it have USB free pass-through?
We can do pass-through. We do not have it in the GUI because we think it's a bad idea to do USB pass-through. But we can do USB pass-through if you require this for a license. But keep in mind that if you attach a USB device to a VM, it would not work. I'm actually rethinking this question, and if it is, can I attach a USB device to my workstation and then connect that to a VM? The answer there is no. We strongly encourage you to do a RDP session or a SSH session for that, and not doing that through the HTML5 mechanisms, because they are way too slow to do this. So you can attach a USB device to a VM, but only support can do this for you, and that means you no longer have HA. If the question was, can I attach it to the console over here, then the answer is no. Does that answer your question, MW?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. So I need to do a refresh because obviously you can see it's already started. Let me do the demo William thing here again, and we see that VM over here running. Let's go to the. Let's quickly do it next here. Let's click install now. Let's go to the devices, because the first thing that you will see in your VM is that it did not only mount the Windows Server 2016 DVD, but it also mounted the Skill virt.io DVD. The Skill virt.io DVD contains our skill tools. The skill tools are necessary, or actually they contain all the drivers for the operating system, and they contain a VSS driver, so our snapshot mechanism can quiet the operating system. So when I'm here, and I don't have a product key, and I just want to do something with desktop experience. So when I'm installing this Windows 2016, I need to actually add some drivers. With a Linux installation, I don't need to do this, because Linux obviously, or actually most of the modern Linux kernels already have virt.io integrated. But Windows, Microsoft still doesn't have virt.io drivers integrated into their regular drivers. And to be perfectly honest with you, they tried once, but because there are so many different KVM forms, they actually uploaded one that was incompatible with the Nutanix version of KVM, and they basically destroyed almost all the Nutanix KVM Windows servers. So I need to point out the Fiostore drivers for this environment, and then I can basically just install Windows. This is a step that's actually quite often missed by our customers, so I thought I just put it in there. Now you see the 2 disks that I've created, and I can start installing my Windows machine. What we also see over here is the virtual disks, which obviously, like you've seen, have the heat priority in there, and you see the network card over here. Now when I click more, I can, when it's powered off, I can change the driver type. So I can change it from VirtIO to Realtek or Intel E1000. I can change the MAC address if I need to clone the MAC address for license purposes or something, and I can address set a VLAN over. And keep in mind that everything else is completely automatic. When I give this a VLAN, the network creation on the backside is actually happening automatically. Then what I can also do, and actually I can only do this on a powered off virtual machine, but I can change the boot order to make the network card bootable. So if you're doing Citrix with provisioning server, you can create a bootable network card. Now, doing snapshots is always cooler with a VM that has been running for a while. The snapshot engine is something particularly of interest here. As I've told you before, we actually have a block-based distributed file system. This means that we have a small advantage on our competitors, while most of our competitors do distributed object-based file systems. And an object is always bigger than a block. So when you create a snapshot and you do a allocate on write, which is the most efficient way of doing snapshots, so the new data actually goes to a new place and the old data is only referenced by the snapshot and not by the actual VM. When you do this with an object-based file system, and let's say your object is 1 megabyte big, later on you still need to copy all the remaining data of that 1 megabyte to new location to make sure that your object is complete. This causes that, for instance, in the Microsoft solution, but also in the Nutanix solution, you have a limit to the number of snapshots that you can have on your virtual machines. And having a lot of virtual machines can actually cause the original VM to slow down quite a lot. We don't have that problem because we don't have that overconsumption of resources. The other thing is we don't do a snapshot reference count, but we do a snapshot reference state. That means a block can have the state, I just belong to one virtual machine. It can have a state, I belong to multiple entities, so to multiple virtual machines or to multiple clones. Or it can have a many state, which means it can belong to multiple virtual machines or to a virtual machine and snapshots. So that's the only three states that we have in a block state, which means we don't get additional performance penalties with more snapshots. So this Williams demo VM over here that you see actually has 83 running snapshots. And if I go here, I can show you that the oldest snapshot here is from the 8th of March last year. So that's a, we can call this a relatively old snapshot. Now, when I go over here to this particular VM, and I open up the console, you see that there is a lot of English and German and Dutch important data on this VM. Johan, my manager, he saw my desktop and he said, William, you cannot have all that important data on your desktop. It needs to be in a folder because that's good practice. So I took this data and I really like the 3D shape of the recycle bin. So I thought that is the perfect folder to put it in. Then Thorsten came to my system and he said, you cannot have any data in the recycle bin. That is bad practice. So he just right-clicked it and emptied the recycle bin. So now I might have lost my job. But you say, no, wait, William, you can restore a snapshot. Yes, I can. Only until somebody makes new, very important data. As you all know, a snapshot is a point-in-time copy. So if I restore to a snapshot right now, it would actually destroy the new very important data because that was not there at the time that that snapshot was taken. We have a very cool solution for that. And this is actually the solution why I'm saying that if you combine this with our replication mechanism, this is a perfect backup system. I can go back in time, let's say this is 15 minutes. And you can see that my snapshots are actually managed per virtual disk too. And you can also see that I didn't clean up my last demo properly because this wasn't supposed to be there. Anyway, now that data is on my desktop, so I know it's in my profile, and my profile is on my C disk. So I can now select a virtual machine, and I can choose a recovery VM. In a more traditional environment, I would have a recovery VM standing by for this. I'm really lazy, so I'm going to do it with the same virtual machine. And I can push this button, which is the clone to machine button. So when I push this button, it will create a clone of this block device and mount it to my virtual disk. So you can see that J&K is my last drive here. I'm going to this virtual machine. I open this and go to this PC. And you see that I actually got a additional L and K drive. The L one is the system reserved one of my C drive, and the M is the C that I just mounted here. So I go to users, administrator, my desktop. I take this data, copy it back, and I just made sure that I can keep my job. Now, to make things complete, I should actually go to devices here, and you saw that I forgot that the last time, and take this J&K drive, select more and delete. And I need to refresh because of that problem that I have with Chrome. I can go to Demo William, go to devices, and also delete this new one over here. I should always do this, William. Anyway, there we are. Now you see over here that I have selected or I've searched for my VMs by Demo William. And like said earlier, I could also use other tags to search here. So I can also search for backup. And this gives me all the VMs that are marked for a backup. Or
William, maybe that's time to ask the second question.
That would be cool.
Okay. Błażej will take over and ask and place and show the second question. Błażej?
Tak, oczywiście. Rozpoczniemy drugie pytanie. Poczekamy, aż większość z Państwa udzieli odpowiedzi. Już są pierwsze odpowiedzi, 4%. Poczekamy jeszcze chwilkę, 17%. Mamy już 39% osób, które odpowiedziały na pytanie. Znowu myślę, żebyśmy poczekali do mniej więcej około 70%. Na tą chwilę 57% już mamy odpowiedzi.
I am so hoping that I'm going to win that prize.
65%. Już mamy 70%. Poczekamy może jeszcze z 5 sekund. Dobrze. To kończymy możliwość udzielania odpowiedzi. Udostępniam Państwu wyniki. Powinniście Państwo otrzymać. 70% osób zagłosowało. Odpowiedzi są różne. Ja znam prawidłową odpowiedź. Jest to oczywiście 11.
Cool.
Okay, so I will stop survey. And one more time, William, you have to share your screen. And let's come back to your presentation.
Cool. I was prepared this time. So we have this nice filter to filter VMs. So I'm going to go back to Demo William over here, and you can see my VMs. And now I have this button that says filtered VMs, and there's actually additional actions that I can do here. So with these filtered VMs, I can say power on, shut down, power off, reboot, but more important, take a snapshot or take a clone. So let's say I wanted to do an OTA street, so doing testing on the same cluster as where I'm doing my production. I could actually very quickly over here create a clone of these machines, put them in a different VLAN, and then work with them in a test environment. So this is really quick. And again, I have to refresh because I am pretty sure that this is already done. Demo William, because cloning is almost instant in our environment. You can see that there's one still running. If it's taking a little bit longer to make a clone, that's because of the VSS engine that's in there that wants to make sure that everything is being quiesced in a proper way. Anyway, a very easy way to create additional clones and stuff. And what is also very nice is all of these functions and features, including changing VLANs and stuff like that, is also available in our REST API. So when I go to settings here, you can see that I have a REST API and that I can enable and disable it. But this also gives me access to the REST API documentation. We have an integrated REST Explorer, as this is called, where you can take a look at what are all the possible commands that I can run, and you can actually try them. So a nice one to try here is the virdomain get command. Virdomain get command, because the virdomain get command actually gets all the information of that cluster at once. So I have this line over here with what do I need to do. So theoretically, all I would need to do is add the /virdomain to my API request. So there's a button that says try it out. I don't need any parameters, so I don't need to fill out anything. So I can say, well, I am William, and this is my password, and then it will run this API request against the cluster. To give you an example, this is the curl command that we used to get this information. If you don't want to use Linux scripting, this is the regular request URL that you need to do. And then below here is the JSON file that you get in return. Now, why is this so important? Well, for example, Splunk, one of the bigger monitoring tools in the world, can read JSON files. So I could actually configure Splunk to query this URL every, let's say, 5 minutes and build logging data based on this information. Or I just duplicated a number of machines for OTA, and I could actually go to the virdomain net device and update a device to go into a new VLAN. And I could script all of this. So although our interface is built for keeping things really, really simple, if you wanted to build a nice OTA street, you could actually provide your developers with a quick script to make clones of the machines that they need to work on in different networks to make sure that they can do everything that they need to do. I think this is a very powerful addition. The API is still new, and it's also still it's called experimental, but our support department will help you with this if anything goes wrong. Just make sure that you keep stick to the latest version to get the best features and functionality here. One of the things that I unfortunately cannot show you is replication, because I don't have a replica partner available for this cluster. But adding a replication partner is really easy. It's only the node IP address that you need to fill in here, a username and a password, and the whole setup of everything that is needed will be done automatically. Once this has been set up, and I go back to my demonstration VM, I can go to my snapshot and replication engine, select the replication connection here, and then replicate that VM. And replication is per VM, and the replication is snapshot based. So before the next question can be typed, this is asynchronous replication. simply because we wanted to keep this simple and we wanted to keep this achievable for all users, because synchronous replication requires some really strong network connections, and synchronous replication lowers or actually makes your recovery time objective longer, especially when you're using databases that are not quiesced, because you can't quiesce when you're doing a synchronous replication. Will take quite longer to recover than when you're doing asynchronous replication. The other big benefit is since we're doing snapshot-based replication, you can actually consider this to be a full backup solution. A snapshot in itself, a snapshot in its own, is never a backup, because if you lose the original, the snapshot becomes worthless. You don't have any value in that. A replica by itself is useless, because if you destroy data in the original, it will also be destroyed in the replica. We do snapshot-based replication, meaning that we have both the original and all snapshots at both sides. So I can call this a full backup solution, because I can completely lose one side and then have everything available on the other side still there, or I can do file-based recoveries from both sides. Having said that, you need a schedule. So you can see over here that I selected the snapshot schedule, my uber important stuff. And when I go back to my management environment, you see my schedules over here with over here my uber important stuff. Now, when I go and edit this, you can see that I'm doing a snapshot every minute with a retention time of 6 minutes to make sure that I overlap with every 5 minutes, to make sure I overlap with every 56 minutes, every hour to make sure that I overlap with 25 hours, every day for a week, every week for 6 weeks, every year or every month for a year. And this is really cool. This is a new feature. I can now set a different retention time for my remote. So locally, this would be saved for a year, and I can do 372 weeks remote. So I have a local retention of a year and a remote retention of 7 years. Or I could even go further and do local everything, let's say, for a week, and remote for multiple years. So I can save storage on my local site. I don't have a remote site, so I can't save this, but it would be nice. Then going top down through the control center of everything that we didn't cover yet. Cluster log is named, so if a user does anything wrong, you can always see which user did that. Control allows you to power down the cluster, but please don't do that when you have technical difficulties, because we always like to do a root cause analysis to just prevent that same problem in the future. Media is where I upload my own ISOs, so I can do installation. Remote clusters is where I have my replica partners. Remote support, if there is a problem with the cluster and you call support, our remote engineers can ask you to open a tunnel. They will give you a code. You can put that code into here, and when I click open connection, this one won't work, but when you click open connection, it will open up a outbound SSH session to our support department. This allows our support department to look into the operating system of the cluster and to look into all the log files, look into the network, look into the storage configuration. It does not allow them to look into virtual machines. So if a support engineer wants to help you with a virtual machine, he will most likely also ask you to do a WebEx session. This is an outbound connection, so you don't need any inbound firewall rules for this. And when you no longer trust it, you can always hit the close connection button, and it will close the connection, and the support engineer will no longer be able to help you. Schedules we've seen. Support. I need to go back to support, because support is all support. We've already told you that we run on Lenovo servers right now. So we sell Lenovo appliances. However, all the support for a skill cluster lies with skill support. So also the hardware support lies with skill support. This goes even further. We have integration with Acronis for hypervisor level backups. We have integration with let's call an example, a LeoStream for a VDI, and all of the products that we have a full integration with and that you can purchase from us are supported by us. So if you were to do a LeoStream environment with a Skills environment and you have bought the LeoStream licenses from Scale will do 100% of the support also for the VDI solution. Schedules, we've seen that. Settings is where all the general settings like DNS, like time server, like email recipients for alerts, like syslog are. SSL certificate is where you can upload your SSL certificate so you don't get any certificate warnings and you have a very secure connection. Update is where you will find the Update Now button. User management is where you can create users with different roles and different things that they can do. Support has a couple of links to our support portals, to our community, etc. And exit brings me back to the environment over here. Now, the only thing that you have not seen yet about a skill cluster is the installation of the cluster itself. Now, the installation of a cluster itself is really easy. So on each node, you will need to attach a keyboard and a mouse, and you will have to type the command. This will actually also be shown when you log into it. You have to log into it with admin, and you don't need to change that password because the only thing that you can do with that user is install the cluster. It does not have any other rights. Once you're installed, you type sudo sc node init with an enter, and then it will ask you for the front end IP. It will ask you for the subnet mask, and it will ask you for a gateway. Then it will ask you for the backend IP address and the first backend IP address. So if this is 192.168.1.1, this will be 2, but on the second node it will be the one of the first, and on the third it will be the one of the first. And then you hit enter. This will take about, I believe it takes about 3 minutes. If you have done that on all 3 of the nodes, you go back to the first node, you say sudo sc cluster init. It will ask you if you see all the IP addresses. It will give you a report of the IP addresses. It will ask you, do you see all the IP addresses are required for this cluster? You type in yes. It will tell you that it will destroy all data that's on the hard disks. Again, you have to type yes, and then it will take you 10 minutes, and then you have a cluster. This is, except of course from the racking and stacking, the entire installation procedure. There's nothing else to it. So right now I'm going to congratulate all of you and saying that you are now skills certified. Gregors has a question which I cannot translate. I'm trying my best, but it doesn't work for me. So Jerzy, can you maybe, or Blažej, can you maybe help me translate that question?
So the question is that you want to see the explanation of every icon in the screen of every VM. For example, the key icons and others. Could you explain it and show that?
Yeah, so the default view obviously is the telemetry view, where I have the telemetry of all the VMs, and then below you have these additional buttons. This one is the edit VM, so I can add or remove CPUs, memory, give it an additional tag or whatever. The next one is the live migrate button, so this allows me to place this VM on another node. The third one obviously only works when the VM is powered down, but this is the delete button, allows me to delete a virtual machine. The fourth one is the clone VM. This allows me to make a quick clone of this VM. Let's say I want to test something very quickly, but I don't want to test it in a production VM. I can make a quick clone of this virtual machine and make a clone, and it will allow me to change things. So it will allow me to generate a new MAC address to prevent disk failures, I can say, well, you know what, I need a terabyte disk with that's too big. I need a terabyte disk with this, etc., etc., and then quickly create that clone. If I need to do something else to the original, I could also use the same MAC address, so I can make the changes, and if I want to keep them, then I can just delete the original, whatever you want there. So that's really nice. And this is a snapshot. So let's say I am going to test something, but I want to make it permanent immediately. I can just first make a snapshot to make sure that I can go back to that snapshot. So over here, I can do a manual snap. This will create a manual snapshot. Now in the devices, this one will allow me to add a additional drive, and I can choose what kind of device I want to do. The second one will only work by with a VM that's powered off. Can generate a new network card, and again I can choose what kind of network card. I can put in a manual IP MAC address or leave it empty to create a new one, and I can put a VLAN number in there. And the last one over here allows me to change the boot order, so I can boot from network as an example. Then with the snapshot engine, again, I have the clone and the snap buttons. They are just there for your convenience. And I also have the export button. This export button allows me to export this virtual machine to an SMB share. And in the same fashion, I can also over here import a VM. Now, it says that this needs to be an HC3 format VM, but this could actually also be a
VMware or Hyper-V.
An Hyper-V or a VMware VM. Thank you there. So you can also import foreign VMs for migration purposes. Now, having said that, we also have a tool that does this in a more organized way, which actually creates a replica of your existing VM, where VM or a temporary replica of your VMware VM on a skill button with a failover, or on a skill cluster with a failover button. Hear me say temporary because this license will only work for a month. And Jan, that same tool also does a P2V if you want to do that. So you can do a P2V with, we call it HC3 Move, which is powered by Carbonite. What you can also do, which is also an interesting question, which we also support, is the use of Clonezilla. So you can actually make a Clonezilla image of your existing hardware and then import that into the HC3 environment. Obviously, the move method allows you to do this while the VM or the physical machine is running. A Clonezilla clone only works when that virtual machine is down. Last but not least, if you also purchase the Acronis backup mechanism with this, you can also use Acronis to do the to create a backup of your physical or virtual machine, and then restore to a virtual machine on a skill system. So there's multiple ways, but if you want to go more in depth in that path, I would strongly suggest that you have a discussion with us, and we can also tell you about the services that we have around this, because we also have services that will help you with this. So that's that. In addition to the where can I modify network properties, you only have to do this at the VM level, and the switches and stuff we do automatically. So when I create a VLAN over here and click update, if that VLAN does not already exist, the attachment of that VLAN to the trunk will be done automatically by us, and you don't have to worry about that one. Any other questions for now?
Okay, in the meantime, I think we should ask the final question, the third one. Yeah. So Boazey, please post it and show to all. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I see. So others also are able. And then let's wait.
I tradycyjnie poczekajmy mniej więcej do 70%, aż wszyscy Państwo odpowiecie. No, odpowiedzi też są różne, widzę. Już mamy 32%.
Yeah, I think I'm going to win. I have everything correct, I think.
You will disqualified.
Me too. Me too.
Disqualified already. Story of my life.
64% już odpowiedzi. Myślę, że jeszcze damy z 5 sekund i zakończymy ankietę. Dobra. Czas minął. Udostępniam Państwu wyniki. Najwięcej osób odpowiedziało, że jest to 5000 i to jest prawidłowa odpowiedź.
Okay. So I think maybe it's final time to ask the question, but I think it's the time to summarize our webinar, our training. So I will switch to Polish, Thorsten and William.
Jesse.
Okay.
Jesse.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
I have I have one last bit of demo.
Okay.
As you might know, one of the partnerships that we have is with Leostream, and Leostream is a VDI broker, and I always like this part of the demonstration because it shows a little bit of the automation that we are capable of doing within the skill cluster. So what I have over here is a small demo cluster. We've already seen this once. This is my WDVC demo cluster over here. On this cluster, I have installed a domain controller, which is one of the first things which immediately makes this solution, the Leostream solution, quite unique, is that they actually don't need it. It makes things easier, but they don't need it. They can also work with local accounts, but that's another thing. What I also have here over here is a broker. Broker is the brains of the operation, and it does all the smart stuff. And I have a gateway over here, and the gateway is literally what it says. You can put this in your demilitarized zone or in your in your internet-facing zone to allow people to easily connect to their virtual desktops, but also to their physical desktops in the office. So over here, I have a short overview of those components. So here you see the broker. It's over here. It's the brains of the operation. It is a single pane of glass, so there's only one management interface for this, and you don't need to manage. You don't have different interfaces for different pieces of information. For those of you who have already checked my LinkedIn, yes, I used to work for Citrix, where you have 6 consoles to manage one thing. It gives you a very granular control, so you can create a lot of policies. You can create different tools with different things in there. It can automatically create, start and stop virtual resources. You can even do an extension to the cloud. So you could run a local VDI environment in your own data center, but have a failover to cloud for redundancy purposes. Then the second component that we saw, or actually we haven't seen that yet, but those are the offered resources. And I'm not saying virtual machines only. This can be, obviously this can be virtual desktops. These can be RDS-H hosts, so remote desktop sharing hosts. But this can also be physical machines. And one of the other really special things here is this can be Windows machines, this can be Linux machines, but these can also be Mac OS machines. So you can even share out a Mac machine, especially now with, well, obviously all the shelter-in-place things are starting to stop. But if you have this one user in a company that wants to use his Mac, but he can't take it home, so he needs to go to the office, you can actually give him a remote workplace by using this technology. But it does all these nice things. So these are the offered resources they get the Leostream agent. Then we have the Leostream gateway, which you place in your DMZ, and this allows for internet access. And this completely makes VPN unnecessary. You no longer need a VPN because this does all the filtering for you, and a remote desktop session is already encrypted. But it also includes an HTML5 client. So you could even do clientless access, accessing this from any mobile device, accessing this from an internet workstation, a tablet, you name it. And it's a gatekeeper, so it restricts access to all the resources that you manage. LeoStream and skill computing, we can have the LeoStream infrastructure running on the skill cluster, and we can have the virtual desktops running on there. Obviously, the ones that are not in here, we can also have the physical desktops running over there. So a very quick demo, and I won't make this long, but it's always nice to show what's happening. Down here, you see that I have currently 2 virtual desktops running. So I'm going to connect to these. Over here, I'm going to type in my username and my password. Your first question would obviously be, does it have multi-factor authentication? Yes, it does. I have configured this to work with Push, which is a Cisco MFA product. But you can also do Radius, and you can also do SAML. So Radius would be with traditional RSA tokens, for instance, and SAML would be if you're using AAD or Ping Federate or you name it. So I'm going to send myself a push message, and I get a request on my phone to approve this. I approve this over here, and I'm logged in. And now you can see that I have number 4 is assigned to me over here. Now there's a very cool feature. I told my VDI solution to always have 2 desktops waiting for me. When I log in to a desktop, this will be 1 desktop less that is waiting because it's already being used. So when I connect to this desktop, you can see that I have it configured to open up the HTML5 viewer. But you see immediately from my Windows 10 template over here, a snapshot is being made. That snapshot is being converted into a clone, and that clone is being made into a new virtual machine with a new name. And that virtual machine now is being made ready to function with my VDI environment. So completely automatically generating new virtual desktops as you go. And obviously you can set limits to this, but it's a nice example of how that integration works. In the meantime, you can see that I am logged in over here on this Windows device. I have a couple of applications in here, and basically I'm working within a web browser. And just to prove that this is actually a real web browser, I can detach it, and you can see that this is just a web page with a virtual desktop on there with all these nice applications. I haven't activated Word in it, so I can't use it, but I can use Chrome, everything in there. So this is a very nice addition, and like how we kept the interface for Scale very simple, also the interface for LeoStream is very simple. It's a very straightforward way of configuring, quickly configuring. Couple of advantages here over other VDI solutions. The first one is it works with the best hyperconverged platform in the world, obviously. Other ones are no requirement for authentication servers, although you can work with them. It has an integrated HTML5 client, can work with many protocols. So mine was just working with RDP, but you can also do PC over IP, you can do HPRGS, you can do a multitude of protocols. Next question would be, can it do Citrix ICA HDX? No, that's a proprietary protocol that they don't sell, so you can't use it. But it can do many other high performance protocols. Last but not least, and again, I think this is a really big advantage, is you will have a single stop support. So the support for the LeoStream product lies with our support department. Microsoft licensing like RDS and VDA is exactly the same as with all other VDI solutions. So if your client already has a Microsoft license, the VDA is included in that. Otherwise, you will require RDS and VDI licenses, which I'm pretty sure that Blaj and Jerzy are happy to help you with. So that actually is the conclusion. And are there any questions on the VDI part right now? Obviously, if you want to have more information about this, please contact Blaj or Jerzy, and they will set up a separate, more in-depth intro into the Leostring VDI solution. Jerzy, Blaj?
Yes. Okay. So I will switch to Polish as I've told before. Tak dla podsumowania, tylko kilka minutek. Jak przed chwilą William powiedział, możemy dla Państwa zorganizować szkolenie i dla Państwa, i dla ewentualnie klientów szkolenie techniczne lub innego rodzaju, także i z rozwiązania VDI w dowolnym momencie, także jesteśmy bardzo elastyczni, nawet jak będzie tylko jeden chętny, jedna firma czy jakiś użytkownik, także nie ma z tym problemów. Natomiast wracając do naszego dzisiejszego spotkania, tak jak Państwu pisaliśmy, to było spotkanie, które umożliwi Państwu zostanie certyfikacji i zostanie certyfikowanym partnerem firmy Scale Computing. Jedyną rzecz, jaką w tej chwili trzeba zrobić, trzeba się wszystkim zarejestrować jako partner, zgłosić się, to nie ma z tym kłopotów, nie ma żadnych warunków wstępnych. No i warunek jest jeden wstępny, oczywiście trzeba chcieć i to jest w zasadzie warunek konieczny i wystarczający. Natomiast, żeby zostać certyfikowanym partnerem, trzeba po prostu przeklikać takie certyfikacje, niby szkolenie, które jest dostępne właśnie na stronie partnerskiej, czyli najpierw rejestracja, później za chwilkę potwierdzenie z firmy Scale Computing, a na końcu przeprowadzenie tej certyfikacji. No i dalej oczywiście czekamy na Państwa zgłoszenia już konkretnych deali. Następna informacja taka jest, że bardzo niedługo już w tej chwili, to w tym tygodniu dostaniemy wreszcie demo ze Scale Computing. Póki co na początek będzie do niego dostęp zdalny, będzie udostępniony dla Państwa, dla tych, którzy będą chcieli adres IP. Oczywiście wyłącznie, nie będziemy tego robili naraz, żebyście sobie Państwo nie przeszkadzali, także będzie kto pierwszy, ten lepszy na jakiś krótszy lub dłuższy okres czasu. Natomiast jeśli sytuacja dookoła się zmieni i będzie taka potrzeba, będziemy mogli nawet ten klaster Państwu wypożyczyć. Co prawda jest to taki typowo demo wersja, to znaczy jest to ta najtańsza, o której wspominał Thorsten na początku dzisiejszego szkolenia, składająca się z 3 tych małych pudełeczek Intel NUC, to będzie 64 GB RAM, procesor i5 i 1 TB pamięci dyskowej. Myślę, że to w zupełności wystarczy, żeby się zorientować, jak to działa i jakieś tam, powiedzmy, testy, na pewno nie wydajnościowe, ale testy użytkowe przeprowadzić na tym rozwiązaniu. To będzie za chwilkę, my na to czekamy dość długo już, ale już mamy awizację, że lada chwila to będzie u nas, także już jest w drodze, jak nie w Polsce, na tle, także to już się zdarzyć powinno bardzo szybko w tym tygodniu albo w następnym tygodniu. I cóż, jeśli chodzi o tę nie tyle co ankietę, co konkurs, który był organizowany w trakcie, to po zakończeniu, czyli za chwilkę, kolega Błażej sprawdzi rezultaty, zobaczymy kto odpowiedział prawidłowo, no i ewentualnie przy kilku odpowiedziach prawidłowych wszystkich wylosujemy z tych osób, które na wszystkie pytania odpowiedziały prawidłowo i oczywiście wszystkich Państwa poinformujemy o rezultatach tego naszego krótkiego konkursiku, a kolega Thorsten wyśle bezpośrednio do osoby wylosowanej. Zakładam, że jednak było kilka osób, kilkanaście, które prawidłowo odpowiedziały na wszystkie pytania, wyślę bezpośrednio ten survival key do firmy Scale Computing. I to chyba byłoby wszystko tak naprawdę. To jest, serdecznie zachęcam do pytań, do udziału. Będziemy, tak jak wspominałem, naprawdę możemy na żądanie zorganizować szkolenia, prezentacje. Nie ma z tym najmniejszych problemów. Jak zapewne Państwo zauważyli, kolega William jest naprawdę osobą bardzo techniczną i doskonale znający wszelkie zagadnienia związane z IT i z wirtualizacją, więc będzie w stanie odpowiedzieć Państwu na każde pytania i doradzić, w jaki sposób, jak najefektywniej używać tego rozwiązania. Także czekamy na kontakt od Państwa. Tu widzę, że Błażej się pojawił. Chcesz, Błażej, jeszcze jakieś 2 zdania dodać? A z mojej strony to byłoby wszystko.
To znaczy, na sam koniec chciałem wszystkim podziękować za obecność. Ci, którzy uczestniczyli w poprzednich naszych webinarach, doskonale sobie zdają sprawę, że poinformujemy na pewno o zwycięzcę i poinformujemy wszystkich, kto zwyciężył. Oczywiście podamy tylko imię oraz nazwę firmy osoby, która zwyciężyła. Jak Państwo też wiecie z poprzednich webinarów, statystyki są u nas dostępne z tych wszystkich odpowiedzi po 2 godzinach od zakończenia webinaru, więc najpóźniej w dniu jutrzejszym do wszystkich roześlemy informację, kto zwyciężył. Oczywiście webinar jest nagrywany, więc będzie można sobie wrócić do webinaru, tylko opracowanie filmiku troszeczkę zajmuje czasu, więc też do końca na pewno tego tygodnia filmik zostanie opracowany. Poprosimy najprawdopodobniej Państwa o taką drobną ankietę, o ocenę po prostu organizacji całego wydarzenia, ponieważ chcemy doskonalić nasze wydarzenia, które organizujemy zarówno w formie stacjonarnej i tradycyjnej, chociaż w obecnej chwili jest to niemożliwe, ale również w wersji online'owej. Także z mojej strony to wszystko. Ja bardzo dziękuję. Jerzy, jeśli Ty nie chcesz nic już dodać, to oczywiście możemy
tylko
zakończyć.
może bym na chwilkę powiedział po angielsku, bo widzę, że jednak Thorsten i William are listening to us, and I would like to thank you. Thank you guys for your great presentation, and I hope that will very soon bring good results for both of our companies and of course to our prospect partners and prospect and customers. So many thanks, guys, and I think we may expect many requests to inquiries from our partners. So for today, that's all, and thank you, and hoping to hear and see you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you, bye bye. Dziękujemy bardzo, do usłyszenia, zobaczenia.